everybody. My name is Marie Berry, and I'm just delighted to welcome you virtually to this breakout discussion on ensuring women's rights during a pandemic at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. I'm a professor at the Josef Korbel School of International Studies at the University of Denver, and I also direct a program there called the Inclusive Global Leadership Initiative, which aims to elevate and amplify the work that women-identified activists are doing across the globe to advance justice, peace, and security. And in this work, I've come to know hundreds of women activists across the globe. And while their work often looks different at first glance, they're either fighting against authoritarianism in Togo, or against gender-based violence in South Sudan, or for peace in the Koreas, or for climate justice in Russia. One of the things that strikes me repeatedly is that their struggle is also a shared one against many of the same patriarchal, authoritarian, and extractive forces that have created so much oppression in the world. I'm honored to be here today with three and hopefully four, Anna, good, okay, I see you joining here too, four remarkable women activists. We have Anna from FemHouse in Armenia. We have Homa Usmany, who is the executive director of Zardozi in Afghanistan. We have Amalia Toledo, who is a lawyer with Fundación Karisma in Colombia. And we have Sitabile Dewa, who is the founder and executive director of the Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence in Zimbabwe. For this breakout session today, I want to give each of our panelists a chance to introduce you to their work. And then I will ask a few specific questions to our panelists before opening it up to all of you to ask questions via the chat function. So I want to turn now to each of our panelists and really recognize that we are in a moment of multiple crises. There have been new challenges to women's rights because of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, there have been new challenges posed by rising populist and authoritarian governments, as well as because of the ongoing risks posed by climate change. And I want to ask all of you to tell us more about how you and your communities or movements have faced these crises. What strategies and experiences have you seen be successful? And what perhaps new uncertainties have emerged for you? Anna, I'd love to start with you if you would like to jump in, and each panelist has about 5 minutes to just begin to think about that question and to introduce all of us more to your work.
Thank you very much. It's my privilege to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Just a couple of words about the initiative that I'm a part of. Our initiative is called FemHouse, a feminist house. It's a feminist community that aims at creating a safe space for feminist organizing, collaboration, and resistance. This is a very unique space that intertwines feminist activism, art, and academia in the spirit of feminist solidarity and sisterhood. And it's an uninstitutionalized queer feminist imagination that aims at uniting Armenian feminists across different movements, initiatives, groups, and organizations, and strives for fighting against various intersectional oppressions such as patriarchy, heteronormativity, militarism, etc. So I would like to very briefly talk about the challenges that women in Armenia have faced during the pandemic, because I feel that it's important to stress out the main difficulties and crisis situations that we are in, and to somehow talk to those marginalized groups of women who are, as a matter of fact, outside of the margins of which lives matter and which lives do not. So reported incidents and evidence show that the policy of isolation and confinement leads to increased levels of domestic, sexual, and gender-based violence, and therefore to a heightened need of protection against this. In Armenia, women's rights organizations, which are working on gender-based violence, have reported a 30% increase of domestic violence in March compared to February, a 40% of increase in April, and 50% of increase in May. In a small country like Armenia, I don't know how much familiar you are with our Caucasian country, but the number of gender-based violence cases is quite high. And now during the pandemic, the cases have doubled. As a result of the state emergency situation and the lockdown, women suffer more because of domestic violence, unequal distribution of domestic work, limited financial resources, and increasing poverty. There have been other challenges registered, such as the problem of access to communication, transportation system, the lack of sensitivity of police officers, and double discrimination faced by different groups of women. So just to give you a very brief overview about all these challenges. So first of all, we're facing a deterioration of social and economic conditions of women due to the effects of the coronavirus. Women are now in a more vulnerable position. Many of them are daily wage earners and unregistered workers who lost their jobs and are unemployed today, and they have no income. It's also important to stress out that while there have been some state support packages, they were not delivered, taking into account the specificities of various groups of women. For instance, survivors of gender-based violence or women with disabilities, women living with HIV and other disadvantaged groups have not been given a special attention and special support packages, which is a very important issue to stress out. We also face unequal distribution of housework. I believe that it's the same in many corners of the world. It's not a new thing. So women are now working from home if they have the opportunity to work, so if they are privileged enough to save their work. But at the same time, those women who work from home, they also face the inequality of household share, and they are taking care of their children, they are doing the dishes and all the kitchen work. And of course, their work has been doubled or even more. We also face problem of accessibility of means of communication. Women are having hard time using the phone these days because as a result of the coronavirus, women who are being abused are in the same area with the abuser all day. Our observations on the issue show that the telephone numbers of women survivors of domestic violence are mostly registered in the name of their husbands and are strictly controlled by them. Now that everyone is at home, the control has increased and women are often unable to even call from home for help. We also had troubles with the transportation system. So when we had lockdown and the transportation, the public transportation was not working, many women were not able to reach to police stations or different NGOs to seek help, also because they did not have enough money to use taxi services, for example. And of course, we face lack of sensitivity of police officers, who are not sensitive enough to take into account the specificities of domestic violence cases. And we have seen deterioration of the situation of women living with HIV. We even had one death case. So one woman who was in the stage of AIDS, she passed away because of the coronavirus, which was very sad. And this was something that could be prevented, actually. So women living with HIV are in a very vulnerable position, and they had problems with access to medicine, food, and care. And also, we have experienced issues connected with the rights of lesbian, bisexual women, and trans people. Their rights have been violated a lot during this time. Prior to the state of emergency, the majority of lesbian, bisexual women, and trans people worked in the service sector, but during the temporary cessation of activities, they lost their jobs and the opportunity to earn a living. There was a specific trouble connected with trans women and trans people in Armenia, who were very much afraid to go out to the streets during the time when they had to disclose their identification to the policeman. They were afraid that the policeman would see that their gender identification in the passports and their gender expression would not match, and they were very much afraid that this would cause lots of insecurities and even violence. So they were saying,
uh-oh, looks like we may have lost Anna momentarily.
deterioration.
Oh,
Yes.
Anna, your connection's a little bit unstable. But what you were just saying actually is really important and is something that I would like to follow up on in some of the questions that I'll ask you. So maybe as you're getting your internet back, is it back now? There we go. Okay. Anna, do you have any closing remarks? Let's turn it over to Homa and I can ask you to kind of expand in a minute. All right, Homa, let's go to you. And if you could tell us a little bit more just about your work right now and kind of what this moment has meant for it.
Thank you very much, Mary. Hello, everyone, once again. And I'm so honored to be part of this discussion. My name is Homa Usmany, and I'm the Executive Director for Zardozi, Markets for Afghan Artisans. It's a non-governmental and non-for-profit organization that is established in the year 2005 with one-room office. And then tending to support women who are actually the vulnerable women and who have no any other supporter in their home, but at the same time they are skilled women. So any Afghan woman is either born or either learned through their childhood and through their life to do a kind of activity at home, like embroidery, tailoring, or any skill. So therefore, the attention of Zardozi was towards those women from the beginning, because we have two systems in Afghanistan, which is the formal economic system and also the informal economic system. And unfortunately, because of these ongoing domestic and civil war in Afghanistan and other challenges that even today we are facing with our government system, nobody was able to pay attention to the informal sector. However, there has been a little bit of attention to the formal sector of the economy of Afghanistan. Therefore, Zardozi came with that aim and established the organization further in different regions of Afghanistan. Currently, we have our main office in the central region of Afghanistan, Kabul, and we are working in other 4 regions of Afghanistan. We are currently working with 6,000 women, that is covering from the year 2017 up to 2020. So this is the last year of working with these 6,000 women, and hopefully for the next 4 years we will be working with another group of women to train them. So what we are doing in Zardozi, we are trying to provide them economic supports, economic economic trainings, you know, the skills that they have, the activities that they are currently doing at home, but they are not getting paid for it. We are trying to build up on those skills and help them make a living on those skills that they have. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, and as you all may know, that living as an Afghan woman is completely different than women around the world, because, you know, in Afghanistan, women are unfortunately considered the weakest creatures of God, and who may just think that they are only good enough to take care of the kids and to do the home chores. But going outside and providing activities and contributing to the family's economic is something that people still lack trust in women. Therefore, there are a lot of challenges. And through my experience working with Zardozi and other organizations previously, I have noticed that there are a list of challenges internally and also externally. I mean, for example, let's take the example of this main dominancy in Afghanistan, that the husband or father or brother or the father-in-law or anybody who controls the family is trying to you know, prevent women from going outside, because that is first is a shame for them, because they feel shame that women go outside and they are working for earning. However, they have a very suppressive life inside the home. That's not a question, but they shouldn't be going outside the home, and they shouldn't be earning because that's hurting their ego and their family pride. And second issue is the lack of trust among these female families. And you know that this lack of trust is also developed lack of confidence within these women. So they also themselves don't think that they have enough confidence to go and work and provide I mean, living for their families. But also, as I said, there are external challenges that are when a woman would like to do something or would like to start a business, they initially don't have the capital to invest in, because all the property, unfortunately, in Afghanistan is owned by the male member of the family. And these women doesn't have any property. For example, if they would like to go and ask the bank for loan or for you know, those kind of things, they also cannot do that, because the loans have certain conditions, because if you are going to apply for a loan, you have to pay collateral, and at the same time you have to pay interest fee, which is very, very high. And for women who are living in a corner of a village and they have a small business of home-based business, they cannot provide that interest fee to the bank. And also that process of paying back the loan to the bank is very quick. It's like within a month you have to pay one installment, and then the next month you have to pay another installment, which is not workable for women. And the third one is the lack of commercial laws. That the commercial laws are really not woman friendly in Afghanistan, because people never thought that women could be businesswomen and they could work. So also a lack of governmental subsidy projects. Most of these projects, most of these big orders from the government goes to all those male businesses that have connections, that know people in the government. So that's why women are left aside, and that's why their businesses are not even growing. So these are the challenges that we always have it. And during COVID-19, of course, this has doubled the challenges for women in Afghanistan, because as I said, that we are working with these 6,000 women who are running very small businesses, home-based businesses, and that is something that they probably their average earning is around $3 to $5 per day. And unfortunately, due to COVID-19, most of these businesses are stopped, especially from the month of March that initially coronavirus came into Afghanistan. So it was stopped until even now. And that income for these families have stopped. I know there are 1,000 other families.
Homa, thank you so much. I want to be mindful of time, and my chat has been deactivated, so I'm no longer able to give you time warnings, which is how we decided I monitor time. So Andy, I don't know if there's any way of getting my chat back activated, but I have no way of communicating. So, but Homa, thank you, and we'll give you a chance to talk more about that, because I think this is really important. But because we're so tight on time, let's go to Amalia. And then to Sitabile, so that we just have a chance to all kind of introduce ourselves. So Amalia, if you could go and share with us next, keeping it to about 5 minutes or less. And Andy, can you please unmute Amalia?
Thank you so much, Mary, and I'm very glad to be here to join you. Well, English is, as you know, is not my first language, but I promise you that I'm very intelligent in Spanish, and I will do my best with English. And yes, Fundación Karisma is a Colombian NGO, and we are an advocacy organization working on issues at the intersection between human rights and technology. As in many countries, you can imagine, this community is male-dominated. But when we first began our work, I'm talking about 2013, when I joined the organization, although the organization is longer than that. But when we began our work with this, we didn't really think much about the fact that this is a male-dominated field, technology, no? So over time, we began to notice that among our peers, our vision and our way of approaching the issue was somehow different. That is when we realized that what made us different in Karisma. And is that we are a technology policy organization that happened to be led by women. We all the time are making jokes that we have our gender quota is our 3 guys that join us, and we are a team of 13, around 13 persons, and we only have 3 guys. The rest of us, we are all women. So this has had an impact on both on the nature of our view on human rights and technology issue, but also on how we are perceived by the broader technology community in the region and in Colombia. Because of this, we decided to include more research and policy angles on gender into our work. And it is a very time to work on this, and even very scary to work on the information and communications technology space in Colombia. We have major technology companies coming to Colombia, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. Even the global media has labeled Colombia as the South American emerging tech star. The Colombian government has been working for several years on various digital agenda, on updating the legal framework for the ICT sector in the country, on building cybersecurity and artificial intelligence policies, among others. But when you look closer, you see evidence that this digital revolution is not happening for everyone in Colombia. For instance, the government's different digital agenda fails to address this reality in the way it has not acknowledged differences in the access and use of the internet between men and women. And this has been a missed opportunity for the government, and is even worse right now with the pandemic and all the measures, the lockdowns and everything that is happening right now. Although official statistics show that there is an explosion in the growth of mobile use and the adoption of social media, women are not using this technology enough to empower themselves and to take the full advantage of the democratic capacity of the internet to help them organize or advocate for their rights. And this is so true when we are talking about women that are not connected, that are in rural areas, that live in poor communities. Maybe it's not my case, but I'm an exception in the country. Or my situation is just a privilege and an exception. With the growing of smartphones and social media, gender-based violence against women have moved into this digital space, but many women are not aware of their digital rights, nor can they make use of their full potential to access the web because of how insecure it is for us women, because of the taboos that keep us away from the technology, or because the gender roles that certain forms of behaviors are imposed on us. Women are subject to online attacks in the forms of aggressive, sexual, and misogynistic messages. And this is even worse right now in these times. And it's especially worse for those women who are very active in expressing their opinion online, like journalists, activists, human rights defenders, politicians. So this has led us to work on gender-sensitive technopolitics. And in that work, we have researched how the internet is different for women and men in Bogota, in the capital city. And even we inspired the government, the former government, to conduct a similar study nationwide. But sadly, we still don't see how all the data that they collected is being used to inform new policies on the ICT sector. And this is worrisome for us. Right now, when we see that the government, what we are doing at this point is we are following up, monitoring all the measures that the government are implementing that may have an impact on digital rights. And I can later with the discussion can expand a little bit on that, but this is what we are doing right now.
This is terrific. Amalia, thank you so much for that. Sounds like a really tough but important work that you're doing. Sitabile, let's turn to you. And I know, thank you for making this office work. You mentioned earlier that you're in a rural community, a rural area. So we're so delighted that you're here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I'm happy there's a strong internet service here. Hi, everyone. I'm Sitabile Dewa, the founder and executive director of Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence. Our work revolves around identifying, mobilizing, and building the capacity of women who intend to run for public office, those who want to increase the number and quality of women who make it to leadership, influential leadership positions. I'll just run through the challenges that we're currently facing in Zimbabwe, but most of the challenges, it seems like, from what I heard from other presenters, it's more or less the same challenges that we are facing. One, the issue of gender-based violence. There are so many cases of GBV that are being recorded both in rural and urban areas. And the unfortunate thing is civil society has not been declared as an essential service by the government to respond to COVID-19. And women cannot travel to police stations to seek justice because they need exemption letters. So most of them, they are left with no option but to stay at home with the perpetrators. We also have a serious clampdown on human rights defenders, women activists, and also the opposition political parties. We have seen a lot of judgments that have been made in the past month in favor of the ruling party, to the extent that MPs from the opposition have been taken and given to one of the losing opposition member who is amenable to work with the ruling party. And we were facing challenges before the COVID-19 came, issues to do with economic decay. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no basic food in early last year, and we haven't recovered from there. From that, there's serious drought, and there are donations that are being made to kind of cushion the need, most of whom are women and girls, but there's a lot of corruption that is taking place. The private sector, international donors, they're bringing a lot of staff to assist the vulnerable, but up until now, there is no clear accountability and transparency in terms of who is receiving what. So, a demonstration, and 3 young women activists, one of them a young MP, were arrested. They were abducted, tortured, and they were sexually abused by suspected state security agents. So as women's activists, we were really seized with the issue. We had to raise a lot of regional and international attention, to the extent that the United Nations had to issue a statement last week condemning the human rights violations. And women being the primary health care, they are the ones who are now being burdened with taking care of the sick. There hasn't been much awareness raising that has been conducted around how to take care of patients, hospitals without recuperative communities, in terms of further exposing the learning. But less than 2% of the rural population has access to the internet, but now the government is proposing to do e-learning, and this is further burdening the women who have to train the children back at home. And last week, they also introduced that schools must be opened with teachers being the majority with women being the majority of teachers. Most of them now are going to be exposed to the virus. There's also the general decay of the health system before COVID-19. We have seen dilapidated clinics, hospitals, there's no medicine. So women are also kind of suffering from pre and postnatal poor services, as they cannot access those services right now. They are not there. I also want to speak to issues of access to sexual and reproductive health rights. There are no contraceptives. Women, especially from the rural areas, cannot access that. And lastly, I will speak to the issue of the women in the informal sector. The majority of women in Zimbabwe belong to the informal sector. This informal sector was closed only to be opened 2 days ago. So women were really struggling in providing the basics at home. And if they want to provide the basics, they have to queue for fuel, for sugar, for cooking oil, and also mealie meal. And this has further exposed them, one, to the coronavirus, and also to the harsh economic conditions, because they cannot provide for the families, they cannot provide for their children. So it's a really serious case here in Zimbabwe.
Wow, thank you so much for all of that context, Sitabile. This is very worrisome, and I'm really grateful for all of the kind of details that you provided. I want to ask a few follow-up questions to each of our panelists before opening it up to the audience. And let's start back with Anna and give you a chance perhaps to finish what you were saying. But I want to really drive home to everybody that FemHouse, the organization that you've created, is first and foremost a space where people can come. It's a space where queer communities can gather. And of course, spaces during the pandemic have become very fraught, because of course we fear that our bodies are vectors of disease. And I'm just curious to know more about how you are implementing different kind of strategies to be able to still hold space for community, especially among queer communities in Armenia. What sort of new innovations have you pioneered or put forward?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to know from where I was cut, just to understand if I could finish up what I was saying.
Of course, of course. And we have about 2 minutes, 3 minutes for each panelist right now, just to keep in mind.
Yeah, okay, so just in short, I was also talking about the specific questions that lesbian, bisexual women and trans people face in Armenia. And also I addressed the issue of women and girls with disabilities. So I will not go into details, but I wanted to highlight that it's important to talk about women in all their diversity and to highlight the specificities that specific groups of women have here in Armenia, but also in every corner of the world. As to FemHouse, you know, our initiative was first of all about the physical space, so it was very difficult to move to online and digital space. But we found out a way how to approach to this situation. So first of all, we undertook all our work online, and we used this this period of time as a possibility to pause and reflect on our activism, on our different strategies that we're deploying in our everyday work. Otherwise, when we were open every day to the public, we didn't really have time to reflect on our political position and different activities from a very deep conversational level. So it was a very big moment for us to have a reflection on ourselves and our work. Also, we found out that our communities really need psychological support in these difficult times, and thanks to the support of European Endowment for Democracy, we were able to deliver free psychological support to our queer communities, and so far it was pretty popular. We tried to organize lots of online events not to lose the touch with our community. So we used secure online platforms for that. We established a reading club. In the module is called Questioning Power, Institutions and Structures from Feminist Perspectives. And it's been a very popular module. And one thing that is very important to mention is that we had several participants outside of Armenia who are Armenians joining the reading club. So the physical space in that sense was limiting for those who are not living in Armenia, but the online space gave us a chance to also reconnect to those who couldn't be with us in our physical communal space. Also, we were collaborating with other LGBT and women's rights groups, and they were giving humanitarian aid to various groups of women and LGBT people, and we were referring our community members to them to make sure that they get necessary support. And last but not least, we see this pandemic as an opportunity, and if we have time, at the end, I would like to sum up how I see this situation as an opportunity and not just a crisis. So probably that's all for now.
I'm grateful that you mentioned that, Anna, and also really grateful that you mentioned the kind of the possibilities of connection across very different contexts. I know we were reflecting just when we started this conversation today, I was saying good morning to everybody because it's quite early where I am in Denver, but of course it's afternoon and evening for some of you. And so, you know, just the ability to connect across the world in these spaces, it's not the same as being in the same room, but it creates other opportunities and possibilities for connection. Homa, I want to go back to you and really give you a chance to tell us more about what I think you were still talking about, which is how COVID and this crisis has really affected the women that you work with. Can you just kind of tell us about kind of what's changed and what strategies you're implementing to begin to accommodate some of the major challenges that have resulted from the shutdown of the economy, from the lockdown and so forth?
Thank you very much, Mary. I think I stopped by describing the challenges during COVID-19 is that our clients had to stay at home and there was no activity and all our centers and the communities were closed and all the activities were shut down because the government put 100% quarantine and nobody was allowed to go out and do anything. But we knew that these people are hungry and they're in a very bad situation, and some of the clients, these women were even calling us, crying over phone that they don't have food for their children at all. So then we had to sit again and decide that this is the time we have to do something. I know it's quarantine, I know there are restrictions, and we also have to be protective because it's a risk going out and doing something. So then we decided that, okay, the majority of our clients are working, they're good tailors, we can provide them the opportunity to prepare face masks in this situation, because as we know the face masks are shrinking in the entire country, and nobody was, especially the poor people, were not able to afford a single mask because the prices went very high. So we thought that it's a good opportunity to just involve them in making masks, because it will also create an income for them, and at the same time there is a huge demand for that. So we tried to use the opportunity of the internet and get connected to the hospitals, to the Ministry of Public Health in Afghanistan, and to all other small superstores and markets where we thought that we can ask them to give us the order and we can provide them. So what we did first, we asked these women to provide some samples with a very good quality, and then we were showing these samples to the people, and gladly that really worked for most of our clients, because they got an income, and at the same time the people got masks with a cheaper price. And beside that, they were also, some of the clients also provided some protective uniforms for health workers, especially for the Ministry of Public Health in Afghanistan, which is a huge order that we just signed an MOU with the ministry, and I'm really glad for that, because we can involve more than 100 of our clients for that order, and that's a huge achievement for us. What else we did was we thought that, okay, it's a hard time, let's do some fundraising. We have rich people, we have friends inside Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. Let's ask them to share something so that we could share with these families. So beside our current donor, which is the Global Affairs of Canada in Afghanistan, the Embassy of Canada, we also went through family members and friends and business owners and also the MPs of Afghanistan, and we were really glad that we quite allocated a living for at least 2 months for around 60 families. That is the average number of the families are from 5 to 10 members. That's another achievement that we did, and that's still ongoing. The other thing beside this food distribution that we did was to disinfect the communities, because however, as I said, the government was putting the restriction on the movement, but still you cannot stop people in the communities, especially in the rural areas. So we also bought some disinfecting and asked our own clients, these women leaders in the community, communities to disinfect their local transportations, their local bread shops, and also the small stores that they have in the community. And another thing that we did, because all of our clients are not tailors and they are working in different sectors, so we thought that for the time being, we can find them jobs so that they can earn at least something for their families. So we contacted all the big superstores in all the regions that we are working, and also the big wholesalers of fruits and dried fruit. So we asked them that, hey, we have a number of women who are very experienced and they can work for you. Why don't you just get connected, and so that they can help you with the processing of the dried fruits and cleaning of the dried fruit, and at the same time they can earn a living. So there are huge some number of companies that agreed with us, and most of our clients are busy now with those companies.
Homa, thank you. It's really interesting. So I want to turn to Amalia, because one of the things that's come up in both your comments and in Anna's comments is about the kind of new possibilities that were created by connection and internet and platforms and so forth. But Amalia, I imagine that your work is also kind of involved with what new challenges this emphasis on kind of moving things online, on contact tracing, on the various ways of surveilling kind of the spread of the virus. How has that also created new complications and challenges for democracy, for privacy, for issues related to kind of privacy and human rights more broadly?
Yeah, well, the pandemic has definitely disrupted the whole society, but we women are the ones carrying the greatest burden, no? We have seen an explosion of gender-based violence, although at the beginning, we were like seeing something like, for me, what I call like a sort of a period of grace, where I was watching and monitoring the digital platforms to see what was going to happen with that, reading notes about how, for instance, dating apps were more used, and the conversations were longer, were more deep, more emphatic, and I was like, oh well, this may change things around, and that's good. But that period of grace ended pretty soon, and we started to get a lot of we are available to help anyone that is subject to gender-based violence online, any attack, harassment, or anything like that. And the few weeks back, we have received so many cases and weird cases, very different cases on what is happening. I don't know, like Skype calls from unknown people with very disturbing pictures or images, or even WhatsApp. More cases on non-consensual dissemination of sexual images. And when we talk among ourselves in the region with the collectives and groups that work on similar issues, we are all in these kind of cases that are getting to us looking for help. And so we are trying to, first of all, give people, especially women and LGBTQ communities, information on what they can do. It's sad because we shouldn't be the ones doing something. It's not on us to be safe on the internet, not only on us, but it's, at this point, is what we can do to bring some information around that. But also in terms of the contact tracing technology that is being so popular all over the world. Colombia is not the exception. We are on this trend as well. And in fact, we even have an app, a health app developed by the government that was first, even before the stay-at-home orders was given for this pandemic. It's an app that it only is, well, it's collecting a lot of data very sensitive data. At the beginning, it collected very, very sensitive data. At this point, what we know is doing, which is different than what it really is doing. What we know is doing is just collecting symptoms. You just report your symptoms, and depending on who you are, what are your symptoms, apparently you get or something to proceed with the authorities to attend your situation. No, but for us, this has been most of our time, our efforts are dedicated to these discussions because we see the government moving this or spreading this message that this is the magic app that will save us from the pandemic, no? And it's so sad to listen to that, and so frustrating, because it seems like they don't know the country that they govern. They don't know the social economic conditions of the country that they govern. You know, it's like the country is not full connected, but all the statistics also show that even when we are connected, women do not have skills to deal with that kind of apps. You know, usually in Colombia, all the reports, the investigations that we have done here and others are done here shows that we women usually only use cell phones for communication and for entertainment, and we lack skills to use more deeply or more sophisticated. I have a more sophisticated use of the phone. In my case, I use it very little because I don't want to be connected all the time, but that's completely different from not knowing how to use the cell phone. So they're sending this message that we have this magic app that is actually available only for a few.
Right.
It will only be feasible for a few, and actually those that are available, those that can use this app are the ones that are in a better position to respond to the pandemic.
Right.
For you that live in a very far community, in the rural area, that are not connected, that are in a very overcrowded community in a urban area, which you are in a highest risk, for you, we don't have a solution, you know?
Right.
And that's very frustrating for us to see that. And the government is just, we do advocacy work. So we are all the time talking with the government. But what we have seen right now is that they shut down the doors for everyone to talk to them. It's only one-way street. And they are coming with all of this, and they are not being transparent. We don't know who really are behind the development of this app. They say they have a lot of volunteers, they have a lot of companies coming and help, but we don't know who are behind. And I suspect that most of these people behind are only men, which is also a problem. And they are telling us how they think this really helps in the pandemic. They assume that this is an effective technological solution, which is not, and it's been shown every day and that is not. We don't know any criteria for them to measure how this is being successful or not. We don't have even the code available to look into it. That's why I'm saying that we think it does, but not exactly what
exactly.
It really does.
There's lack of transparency around how everything is, where it is going. There's lack of transparency. Yeah. I think you're breaking up a little bit. Are you still? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no. I mean, I think you're highlighting some critical points around inequality and access to internet, inequality and access to technologies, and the types of kind of the lack of transparency around the uses of the data that's being collected in the name of public health, right? And so I think it's just really, really important, all of the issues you highlighted. I want to give it a chance to Sitabile, to tell us more about the strategies that you are using to be able to keep doing your work in Zimbabwe, in both the current kind of pandemic context, but are also in the broader kind of political context in Zimbabwe. And just kind of to share with us anything. We have about 3 minutes left for this discussion before we open it up to all of you in the audience for questions via the chat box. So begin to get those questions ready. And I already see one from Socorro. I'm so thrilled, my friend. Good to see you. But Sitabile, please share more with us about some of the strategies you're using to continue doing your work. Oh, Andy, we need to unmute her. The Zoom settings are a little funny for this session.
Thank you.
I can't unmute anybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just like all the other colleagues, we had to turn to social media, to the virtual space for us to discuss the women's movement.
Sitabile, you might want to try turning your video off.
And in terms of engaging the community, to praise our NGOs so that we are able to train them virtually. Can you hear me now?
It's very choppy, so try turning your video off and we'll see if that's better sound.
Okay. Oh.
There we go. Let's try that. We should be able to hear you anytime.
Can you hear me now?
Sort of. Keep trying. Let's try it.
Mary.
Yes, I can hear you. Unfortunately, it sounds to me like you're losing connection. So let's come back to you, no problem. Hopefully connection will come back. But again, reminding us of the issues of good internet access all across the world, right? This isn't something that is sort of a consistent public good, right? It's something that's very, very difficult to access for so many people. And so when we're moving organizing and advocacy and activism work online, it creates these new inequalities of access and challenges of organizing. So let me turn it over to everybody in the audience here to ask any questions of our panelists. And I see a brilliant question from Socorro, who has asked about the care economy, fundamentally kind of what types of challenges are emerging, particularly for women, for girls, when it comes to childcare, caregiving, educating the children in this context of a pandemic, when schools are closed, and when there's so much additional sort of focus on the home. Socorro asks each of you to share if there is about how this care economy and these kind of care inequalities are being addressed in your particular work, or perhaps in the country in which you're living and doing the work. And she also reminds us that access to digital devices is very also gendered and not evenly distributed and divided, of course. So does Anna or Amalia, Homa, if I think you're still with us, but whoever's able, anyone want to reflect on that?
Well, I can mention a few things. This is definitely an issue in the country where the rural areas are not connected, or they may have one, what is called here a kiosco, where you can go and connect. But that's completely different when you are locked down and they say you cannot go out of your house. So you are not able to use it. Or when your connection comes from a cell phone, from internet mobile, and you know, and that's not the best device to do everything that is required right now, like telework and work and remote or digital e-learning or anything like that. But what we have seen, but these are very like projects that are happening there and now and there and some places. Radio in Colombia is still one of the main medium of communication. So there are a few projects or initiatives that are rescuing radio educational programs as a mean to, you know, to keep doing this the learning processes in far away areas in the country. That's something that is happening in some places, but this very you know, dispersed. It's not something, it's not a strategy that is coming from the government. It's more than initiatives coming either for communities themselves or some majors or something like that. Just rescuing this tradition is something that it was done in the past in Colombia. It was very popular in the 70s or in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And it was recognized as a good educational program. So there are a few initiatives that are rescuing this kind of initiative.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. I see that Sitabile is back. So let's turn it over to you and give her a chance to kind of answer a last question, or perhaps engage with this current question about care, also about the digital divide. I think she's back. Sitabile, can you hear us? Darn. Okay, we'll keep trying, and this, as her internet's active, we'll have a chance to hopefully hear from her again. Homa or Anna, anyone, either of you want to engage? There's another question on the board that I'll throw out there for all of you, which I think is another really brilliant question. And of course, please, everyone in the audience, if you have questions for the panelists, now is a great time to put them in the chat box. Socorro asks another question as well, which is, how do we as women's rights defenders deal with strongman rulers who have seized the pandemic to command, control, and consolidate their power? The pandemic is treated as a peace and order issue, which has been mobilizing the police and the military instead of a public health issue. And I can say that in the United States, we faced quite a bit of this. We've seen a lot of this, especially because of the protests responding to the Black Lives Matter and the murders of many Black Americans in the last couple of weeks. We've seen a lot of this militarization and this police sort of mobilization in this moment of crisis. So if anyone wants to engage with that question as well, I'd really invite you to do so. As I see Sitabile coming back, so you're there now. Can we hear you? We see you. You're moving.
Hi everyone. My apologies. My apologies. Transmission. Okay, I was saying I'll just run through some of the initiatives that we've done is reduce the amount of trainings that we were doing physically to then compress them to online. Can you hear me?
I can almost hear you, but you sound sort of like a cute robot. It's a little hard. Try again. We have all the patience.
You can hear me.
There I can hear you. Yes.
What about now?
Yes, that's better.
What about now? We have also engaged with the private sector to provide. We have engaged the private sector to provide food packs to victims of. Can you hear me?
Not really. Unfortunately, it's very
Mary, can you hear me?
not really. I heard you
to women victims of gender violence.
I think that's too bad right now. I'm so sorry. Let's actually, Sitabile, if you wanted to type something, perhaps we could hear your answer in the chat box. That might be a better way of sharing with us. What you said was really fascinating. What I heard was that you've created private sector partnerships to create food packs for people in your community and in your network. And that sounds like a really interesting innovation that would be great to share with everybody, perhaps via chat, since it sounds like the internet's a bit shaky. Let's turn it over as we're sorting with that out. Or this is our new reality, right? And let's turn it back over to the rest of the panelists to engage those questions if those are questions that resonate with you. Homa or Anna? Amalia?
Well, I already spoke too much. I don't know if Homa.
I think we might, Amalia, you might be frozen too. Anna or Homa, are either of you wanting to jump in? There's a couple questions in the chat box too.
Yeah, I can try to answer the two questions, but in a summary way, like summarizing those questions. I think both are connected to poverty issues and privileges. So I think that we cannot talk about women's rights and empowerment when women don't have a minimum level of economic security to buy necessary means for their everyday existence. And if there is one thing that we could learn from the pandemic these days, is that any civil society effort is going to fail if gender depression is not connected to poverty and political economy in a given country and also on a global level. Class matters, economic security matters, free and accessible healthcare matters, access to technology matters, questioning privileges and power structures matters. So unless our fight is intersectional, there is no chance for the social, economic, and political change in our communities and countries to happen. So what our collective has done so far in terms of using this pandemic as an opportunity. So we became a member of, became a member of Progressive International Network. If you are not familiar with the network, just Google it now. It's a marvelous network. For example, Arundhati Roy is part of the board members. This is a fantastic space to make our voices resonate and to have an impact on global level. And we're trying to strategize with like-minded groups and initiatives from all around the world. And this is connected with issues of class, race, militarism, oppressive governments, democracy issues, colonization, climate change, climate crisis, and many, many other issues. So this might be another way to get strategized on a global community level, just in short.
Yeah, fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much. Maybe last words, very last words. We have 4 minutes left. So Homa, any final concluding thoughts? Or Amalia?
No.
Can you repeat?
I said now we have 3 minutes left.
Because you,
Any very concluding thoughts to any of the questions on the board?
Yeah, probably to the one that said what role men can play in supporting women, strengthening the role in the local and global community. On that one, I've been doing some research on telework and gender, because some questions are coming this. And one of the things that is so important on this, when we have this telework, when all men have the chance to telework, men has to go for it as well as women, and men has to share all the labor and the work that is, and in order to help, men also have to support their partners on their careers. Otherwise, and on their careers, the projects, their dreams. Otherwise, we'll still stuck in the same patriarchal structure and not changing anything, you know. Just very short, just something that comes on my research on telework and gender that is so important to change. Telework is seen as an option only for women because of the flexibility it gave to us on dealing with all the domestic caregiver labors and work. Also, men have to come front and say, yes, I want to work, I want to share all the responsibilities that we have at home and at work, and I want to support my partner on all her careers in some projects.
Thank you. Absolutely. I totally see that and get that as well. I want to just bring everyone's attention to the chat box, because Sitabile has been adding some really valuable, important conversations in the chat box. She's talked about how, you know, how to prevent dictators, you know, from consolidating power during the pandemic. She encourages, I think, all of us to speak up, to utilize social media through the running of powerful campaigns that expose the excess of the state. She's also talked about partnering with the private sector to distribute water in informal settlements, to reduce the burden of unpaid care work on women, getting at some of the questions. And of course, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a really valuable channel, I think, to communicate and to train and to organize. And as Sitabile says, they've used WhatsApp to train women on how to monitor and document human rights violations against women. So I just wanted to kind of flag all of that on the chat box. Anna, you had one last thing to say. If you could keep it, actually, I think we're actually out of time, so I'm so sorry. Please go ahead, and it's very true. There's other more secure platforms than WhatsApp, like Signal. But I want to just give us all a chance to conclude by letting me express my gratitude, I think, on behalf of all of the people in the room, to the panelists. I oftentimes think about Rebecca Solnit's quote and this idea that within the word emergency is the word emerge. And I just am motivated by all of the things I heard you say today that suggest the way in which this pandemic and these multiple crises that we're living in are also creating new spaces for women and for kind of feminist activism to connect and to build new spaces, to build new platforms, to build new modes of organizing, connecting, and beginning to kind of raise voices and awareness and really push towards a future that is more gender just. So I just want to express my gratitude to all of you. A big round of applause to our panelists, and I'm sure that there's ways to get in touch with each of the panelists if you have additional questions. So maybe if the panelists want to share email or Twitter or anything like that, if you're engaged there in the chat, no pressure, but in case people have additional questions or want to follow up with you, that's one avenue to do so. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the Copenhagen Democracy Summit.